Some deaths aren't accidents. They're assassinations by silence. 6 young men who changed entertainment forever, each one erased by an industry that celebrated their talent while suffocating their truth. Their names are household legacies. Their faces defined generations. But the private wars they fought against systematic rejection, relentless pressure, and Hollywood's cruel machinery remain untold. This isn't a tribute. This is an autopsy of an industry that consumed its brightest stars because authenticity was never part of the deal. Number 4 will shatter you. His final years were a slow-motion collapse that everyone saw coming and no one stopped. Which story hits hardest? Where are you watching from? Hit subscribe, because these are the lives Hollywood refuses to memorialize honestly. If these stories move you, subscribe and turn on notifications, because the truth about entertainment's darkest chapters doesn't tell itself. River Phoenix, the talent. Hollywood couldn't protect River Phoenix wasn't just another teen idol who burned out early. He was a generational talent whose authenticity became his undoing in an industry that demanded conformity or exile. When he collapsed outside the Viper Room in 1993 at just 23 years old, the world mourned a rising star. What they didn't mourn, what Hollywood still refuses to acknowledge, was the systematic pressure that made his survival impossible from the start. Rivers' breakout in Stand By Me showcased raw, vulnerable talent that critics called once in a generation. His role in My Own Private Idaho took that vulnerability further, exploring sexual fluidity and emotional complexity that mainstream cinema avoided like poison. The performance earned critical acclaim and industry whispers. Those whispers weren't praise, they were warnings. Rivers' willingness to embody characters that challenged heteronormative storytelling made him artistically valuable but commercially risky. Behind the scenes, Rivers struggled with the impossible mathematics of Hollywood stardom. His sensitivity, his refusal to adopt traditional masculine posturing, his openness about exploring identity, all of it made him a liability in an industry that traded on safe, marketable images. The drug use that ultimately killed him wasn't rebellion. It was self-medication for the psychological warfare of maintaining a public persona while suppressing everything that made him human. Industry insiders knew. They watched his struggles with identity, with addiction, with the desperate attempt to reconcile his authentic self with the sanitized version studios demanded. Instead of intervention, they offered more work, more pressure, more reasons to keep performing while dying inside. Rivers' death was preventable if Hollywood had valued his humanity as much as his box office potential. But support systems for young LGBTQ+ actors didn't exist. Only extraction machines that consumed talent and discarded the people behind it. Brad Renfro, the child star. Hollywood exploited and abandoned. Brad Renfro was 11 years old when the client made him a household name. That breakout should have launched a carefully nurtured career with proper support and authentic development. Instead, it became a blueprint for how Hollywood destroys LGBTQ+ young talent through systematic neglect disguised as management. By the time Brad died of a heroin overdose at 25, his destruction was so complete that his death barely registered in the industry that had profited from his childhood. Brad's early work in Sleepers and Apt Pupil showcased instinctive, devastating talent that needed protection and guidance. What he received was exploitation. Hollywood's approach to Brad prioritized profit extraction over human welfare, creating an environment where his emerging sexuality became a problem to manage rather than an aspect of humanity to support. Industry insiders knew Brad was struggling with identity, with the pressure to conform to expectations that governed young actor development. His authentic self was treated as a career liability requiring elimination through various control mechanisms. The descent into drugs and legal troubles wasn't teenage rebellion. It was a direct response to the psychological impossibility of suppressing authentic identity while performing the heteronormative persona Hollywood demanded for continued employment. The same executives who profited from his natural charisma provided no support system for healthy identity development or transition from child star to adult actor. They took what they needed and walked away. Brad's death in 2008 was the tragic endpoint of years of systematic neglect. The legal problems, the addiction, the behavioral chaos, all symptoms of deeper damage caused by an industry that celebrated his performance while rejecting his humanity. Hollywood extracted value while contributing to psychological pressures through rejection and discrimination, disguised as standard business practice. His talent was undeniable. His potential was limitless, but his authenticity was treated as a defect, creating tensions that made survival virtually impossible in an industry that consumed rather than protected its most vulnerable performers. Jonathan Brandis. When the heartthrob image became a prison, Jonathan Brandis should have had everything. At the height of Sequest DSV, he was an international teen heartthrob with a massive fan following and seemingly unlimited potential. Instead, his internal struggle with sexuality created an impossible conflict with the public persona Hollywood's marketing machine demanded. When Jonathan hanged himself at 27 in 2003, the industry that had profited from his image offered condolences, but no accountability for the psychological pressures that made his death inevitable. Jonathan's career began with child modeling and television roles that showcased natural charisma and screen presence. His starring role in Sequest DSV turned him into a global phenomenon, generating massive profit through merchandise, fan magazines, and international marketing. But that success came with conditions. The heartthrob image required maintaining a fantasy of heterosexual availability for female audiences. Jonathan's actual sexuality, an open secret in Hollywood circles, couldn't be acknowledged without threatening the carefully constructed persona that generated millions in revenue. The psychological burden of maintaining that false front while suppressing authentic identity created a mental health crisis that Hollywood executives ignored in favor of continued profit extraction. As Jonathan aged out of the teen heartthrob category, career opportunities evaporated. His attempts to transition into adult roles were systematically sabotaged by industry perception that his sexuality made him unsuitable for romantic leads or mainstream work. Professional exile followed, contributing to depression and feelings of worthlessness that intensified as the rejection became absolute. The same industry that profited from his teen appeal provided no support system for authentic identity development. Instead of acknowledging his complete humanity, Hollywood discarded him when he could no longer perform the profitable fiction. His depression and eventual suicide were direct results of systematic rejection that treated his sexuality as career death rather than an aspect of human identity deserving support. Jonathan's death was entirely preventable if Hollywood had valued people over marketable images. But exploitation, not protection, remains the industry standard. Haim, the lost boy. Hollywood failed to save Haim's meteoric rise in 1980s teen films like The Lost Boys should have been a dream come true. Instead, it became a nightmare of exploitation, abuse, and systematic rejection that destroyed his mental health and made survival impossible. When Corey died of pneumonia at 38 in 2010, his death was the inevitable endpoint of an industry that consumed vulnerable young LGBTQ+ talent while enabling predatory behavior and providing zero authentic support. The sexual abuse Corey experienced from powerful Hollywood figures wasn't a secret. It was systematically covered up. His vulnerability as a young gay actor in an industry that exploited LGBTQ+ performers made him a target, not a protected talent. Predatory behavior continued unchecked through NDAs, career threats, and intimidation that prevented victims from seeking help or justice. Hollywood's response wasn't intervention. It was silence, prioritizing profit and secrecy over human welfare and reform. That abuse was compounded by industry rejection of his authentic identity, making healthy relationships and genuine support virtually impossible. The psychological trauma intensified through systematic denial of the dignity young LGBTQ+ actors deserved. Corey's descent into drug addiction was a direct coping mechanism for trauma caused by abuse and rejection in an environment that demanded continued performance while offering no support systems for young performers facing exploitation. His career decline resulted from industry blacklisting that affected LGBTQ+ actors seen as liabilities rather than assets. Professional exile contributed to depression and addiction while eliminating financial stability and career satisfaction that might have motivated recovery. The same executives who knew about predatory behavior provided no protection, prioritizing profit over human life. Corey's death was the tragic result of years of neglect and systematic rejection that weakened his physical and mental health, while Hollywood continued profiting from his early work without acknowledging responsibility for his destruction. Cheung. When international stardom couldn't shield from cultural hatred. Cheung was more than a Hong Kong entertainment icon. He was a cultural revolutionary whose groundbreaking performances in Farewell, My Concubine, and Happy Together explored sexuality and identity with artistic courage that Asian cinema had never witnessed. His international success and devoted global following should have provided protection and platform for continued authentic expression. Instead, when Leslie jumped from the Mandarin Oriental Hotel at 46 in 2003, his death exposed how systematic discrimination and cultural rejection create psychological pressures that make survival impossible even for the most successful performers. Leslie's artistic excellence challenged Asian entertainment's rigid masculinity expectations through performances that explored themes mainstream cinema avoided. His authentic representation earned critical acclaim and international recognition, but that visibility made him a target for systematic discrimination and cultural rejection. The constant tension between artistic integrity and cultural expectations required exhausting navigation of homophobic environments while maintaining personal truth and professional commitments. The psychological pressure of representing LGBTQ+ identity in culturally conservative entertainment while facing systematic rejection contributed to depression that intensified despite professional success. His relationship with partner Daffy Tong was conducted largely in private due to cultural hostility and career protection needs, creating isolation and authenticity suppression that prevented access to supportive community and genuine relationship recognition. International fame provided no protection from discrimination that made authentic living increasingly difficult, while professional demands intensified psychological pressures through visibility without acceptance. The depression that led to his suicide was a direct result of systematic cultural rejection and industry discrimination that treated his sexuality as career liability and personal shame. His death represented the failure of Asian entertainment and broader culture to provide supportive environments for LGBTQ+ performers whose authenticity challenged traditional expectations. Leslie's legacy continues inspiring countless individuals across Asia, while his tragic death exposes the deadly cost of discrimination that destroys even the most talented individuals when authenticity becomes liability rather than celebrated diversity. Montgomery Clift, Hollywood's original closeted tragedy. Montgomery Clift was Hollywood royalty before the industry even understood what it was destroying. In the 1940s and 50s, he redefined leading man vulnerability with performances in A Place in the Sun and From Here to Eternity that revealed emotional depth male actors rarely accessed. Behind the brooding intensity and magnetic screen presence was a man fighting an impossible war, maintaining Hollywood's heterosexual fantasy while suffocating his authentic identity. When he died at 45 in 1966, His destruction had taken decades, each year eroding him further under the weight of systematic denial. Monty's sexuality was Hollywood's worst-kept secret and most carefully guarded public relations crisis. Studio executives knew, co-stars knew, but acknowledging it would destroy the romantic leading man image that generated millions. So Monty lived in perpetual performance, hiding relationships, suppressing authentic connection, enduring the psychological warfare of maintaining false personas, both on-screen and off. The internal conflict manifested in addiction to alcohol and prescription drugs, not weakness, but survival mechanisms for navigating an industry that demanded everything while allowing him nothing. The 1956 car accident that shattered his face is often cited as the turning point in his career decline. But Monty's destruction began long before that crash. The accident merely made visible the internal damage Hollywood had been inflicting for years. His increasingly erratic behavior, the substance abuse, the professional unreliability, all symptoms of systematic psychological torture disguised as career management. Studios that profited from his talent provided no support for his mental health, no space for authentic living, no acknowledgement of the impossible pressures they created through enforced closeting. Hollywood remembers Montgomery Clift as a troubled genius who lost his way. The industry refuses to acknowledge its own role in his destruction, how systematic homophobia and enforced closeting created the psychological conditions that made his survival impossible. His death from a heart attack at 45 was ruled natural causes. But there was nothing natural about decades of suppressing authentic identity to satisfy an industry that valued marketable images over human lives. 6 men, 6 extraordinary talents, 6 preventable tragedies that Hollywood refuses to claim responsibility for creating. These weren't accidents or personal failures. They were systematic destruction by an entertainment industry that profits from LGBTQ+ artistry while rejecting LGBTQ+ humanity, creating impossible tensions between professional success and authentic living that made healthy survival virtually impossible. Each death proves that fame offers no protection when authenticity becomes career liability. River's sensitivity, Brad's vulnerability, Jonathan's genuine self, Corey's exploitation, Leslie's cultural courage, Monty's hidden truth, all treated as defects requiring management or elimination rather than aspects of humanity deserving support and celebration. The stories continue because the system hasn't changed. Only the methods have evolved. Which tragedy broke your heart most? Drop a number. Where are you watching from? Share this if these lives deserve honest remembrance. Subscribe to Rainbow Spotlight because the industry that destroyed these men still operates today, and silence remains its most effective weapon.